Hi, I'm Glenn Rogers, and this is Biblical Insights. In our video today, we're going to be talking about what is commonly called the Golden Rule. It's a very brief text that comes in the middle of the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus is talking about how people interact with each other and then what is the right way to behave. It comes under the heading of what we often call ethics or moral philosophy. Since I used to be a philosophy professor, I prefer the term moral philosophy, but most people would understand the word ethics. And it has to do, as I said, with how people interact with each other, how they behave, and how we determine what is the right thing to do versus what is the wrong thing to do, and that sort of thing. The interesting thing about ethics or moral philosophy is that when we're trying to figure out what the right thing to do is, it almost always has to do with how we interact with other people. Think about the challenges that you have on a day-to-day basis because of the people that you have to deal with, whether it's family or people you go to school with or people that you work with or your next door neighbors or whatever it is. Think about all the challenges you have. How many of them have nothing at all to do with people? In other words, it's something that's going on, and it's a challenge that you have, and it's a difficulty you have, and you're not sure what the right thing to do is, and it has absolutely nothing to do with people. Most of us don't have very many of those, because most of the challenges that most of us have in life have to do with interacting with people. If you were out on a desert island, right, all by yourself, you had food and water, and pretty much that's all. There were no other people around. How many moral dilemmas would you face on a daily or weekly basis? Probably not very many. Most all of our moral dilemmas, in other words, we're trying to figure out what is the right thing for me to do in this situation. They all have to do with how we interact with people. And the Golden Rule was something that Jesus said about our interaction with other people. Now, most people wouldn't think of Jesus as a philosopher, and I'm not sure in any formal sense of the word that he was a philosopher, but he did an awful lot of philosophy, like he did some pretty good psychology also, and there was a little bit of theology thrown in there. And most people would think of Jesus as a religious teacher, as a theologian. And yet he didn't teach a lot of formal theology any more than he taught any kind of formal psychology or philosophy. Jesus was very practical in his teachings. The things he taught had very basic, practical, day-to-day value. I used to challenge my students to do this and to understand what Jesus' teaching was all about. I said, get yourself a piece of paper and draw a line down the middle, and on one side label it as theology, and on the other side, in the other column, label it as practical. And then start reading through the Gospels, right? And when you read a section about something that Jesus taught, ask yourself, okay, now is this more theological or is this more practical, right? And just make a mark in the column each time where it goes, under theology or under practical living. And read through all the Gospels, and then when you're all done, add them all up and see where Jesus did most of his teaching, or what kind of most of his teaching was. And I think what you'll see is that it wasn't really very theological in its orientation, but it was very, very practical. Jesus wanted to help people live well, live on a day-to-day basis, interacting with other people in a good, healthy way where everybody liked each other and everybody could get along and that sort of thing. And that's where this idea of the Golden Rule comes into play. So we're going to read this brief verse. It's from Matthew chapter 7, and it's in verse 12. It's just one verse, very simple. But Jesus said, treat other people the way you want to be treated. This is the point God was trying to make through Moses and the prophets of old. Treat other people the way you want to be treated. Now, in some other translations, maybe some that you're more familiar with than this one that I just read out of, which is my translation, the Simplified New Testament, it says, do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And that's language that a lot of people are very familiar with. But when you stop and think about it and reword it and put it in a form that we're more comfortable with today as a contemporary English speaker, the idea that treat other people the way you want to be treated is really what it's saying. And it's just that simple. Treat other people the way you want to be treated. Would you want somebody to lie to you? No. Well, then don't lie to them, right? Would you want somebody to disrespect you? Well, no. Well, then don't disrespect them. Would you want someone to say ugly things about you to other people? No, wouldn't want that. Well, then don't say ugly things about others to other people. I mean, you see, it's just really quite simple, isn't it? Treat people the way you want people to treat you. Well, how is that? Well, with kindness and fairness and with mercy and compassion and forgiveness. All of those things that we would like to receive from other people, Jesus is saying, well, then that's what you need to be willing to give other people. Treat them the way you want them to treat you. See, that's what this is really all about. Now, over the years, people who have been engaged in moral philosophy have come up with all kinds of different systems for trying to devise ways of knowing the right thing and the wrong thing to do. What is the moral thing and what is the immoral thing? And they've developed a lot of different theories. And, some of them have said, well, the purpose in life is to be happy. And so you need to do whatever it is will make you happy. And as you're interacting with other people, you need to do what will make you happy. So whatever is the result of this exchange between you and this person, if you walk away from the situation happy, then that was the right thing to do. Well, I don't know. Sometimes you can do some pretty ugly things and walk away from a situation perfectly happy, but you've hurt somebody or you've done something that was ugly or mean, something that you really shouldn't have done. So that idea, I think, of do whatever makes you happy is probably not a good idea, but you'd be surprised how many people today live with that theory. I've had students in my ethics classes, and I taught ethics for a long time, and I've had students tell me, well, I just sort of do what I think is the best thing to do, and then that's okay because that was the best thing for me. And that's how I gauge what's right and wrong. Well, they usually tell me that about halfway through the class when we've started talking about all these different moral systems, and they begin to see that, hey, this is not an easy thing to do. And just because something may be good for me doesn't mean that it's necessarily the moral way to treat other people. It might be good for me if I tell them a lie, but is that the moral thing for me to do? It might be a good thing for me if I steal from them because that enhances my wealth and my position. But is that the right thing to do? Stealing from someone and so forth and so on, taking advantage of people's naivete and all kinds of other things. It may turn out to be pretty good for me, but is it good for the other person? And is it good in general? Is it the right kind of thing to do? And the answer often is no, it's not the right thing to do. So there've been all kinds of systems, a dozen or more throughout the centuries, where thoughtful people, usually a philosopher, has advocated a certain way of behaving. It's a moral theory, and they say if we behave this way and we do these sorts of things, then we're behaving morally. Well, Jesus didn't try to create any kind of formal moral theory. He just looked at people interacting with people on a day-to-day basis from a very practical point of view, as I said, and said that the basic way to get along with people, the basic way to make sure you're doing the right thing, is to treat other people the way you want them to treat you. Now, that's a very simple idea. It's not always easy to do, because sometimes I want stuff or I want a certain outcome or whatever, and I may not behave properly in order to get what I want. And a lot of people are like that, right? And so, there's more to it for some people in some circumstances than simply treat somebody the way you want to be treated. It gets very complicated in their minds because they want something that's going to benefit them, and so they want the advantage, and so they may lie or cheat or steal or do whatever to enhance their own position. But Jesus is saying, no, you need to treat people the way you want them to treat you. And that's how you will do the moral thing. Because we want to be treated with kindness and gentleness and justice. We want compassion. We want forgiveness. We want people to be nice to us, to respect us, and all of those different things. So that's how you need to treat other people. Some of the other systems, as I said, weren't really very good. They concentrated on what in the end is good for a bunch of people, but if somebody else has to get hurt along the way in order to generate the greatest good for the greatest number of people, that's okay, because we have to work with the greatest good for the greatest number of people. That's really not a very good system. That's called utilitarianism. Then there's ethical egoism, where whatever's best for me, and then there's Epicureanism, which is, in the modern sense, it's just hedonistic. It's pleasure. I seek pleasure, and so whatever will bring pleasure to me, that's the moral thing to do that makes me happy, and so that's the right thing to do. On and on and on, all of these systems go, but they're just not quite as good as the basic idea of treat other people the way you want to be treated. Now, there might be some moral dilemmas out there that are not answered. They don't fall under that category of treat other people the way you want to be treated. If you try to follow that rule and you're considering whether or not in vitro fertilization is a moral behavior, well, that's not going to really answer the question, is it? Because that's a very complicated question. What about euthanasia? Someone who is going to be suffering a great deal because of a long-term illness, and they want to end their life before the suffering gets too bad, and that's called euthanasia. Well, treat others the way you want to be treated, that golden rule way of thinking isn't really going to give you much help with a question like euthanasia. What about genetic engineering, the morality of genetic engineering? Well, it isn't really going to help much there either. So there are some big, important moral issues that cannot be answered with the simple idea of the golden rule. there are other things we have to think about and we have to utilize to deal with those kind of questions. And that's what we do in moral philosophy. But what Jesus was trying to do was very basic, very simple, very practical. On a day-to-day basis, as you're interacting with people, treat them the way you want them to treat you. You see? And that's a very good basic rule to live by. And that's why, over the centuries, people have given it the name, the Golden Rule. And it really is quite a good idea. Well, those are my thoughts for the day. I hope they were helpful. And as always, I would encourage you to read your Bible, pray, go to church, and may God bless.